When Oba, the fisherman, looked at her chest, he saw it. Something so round and beautiful, so unsettling, that his breath hitched and his heart pounded in a way he had never felt before. It wasn't just what he saw. It was the way it made him feel, like he had crossed into a realm no man was ever meant to enter. Oba had spent his entire life by the river. Its currents had cradled his childhood games, its waters had fed his family, and its banks had been his silent companion through life's quiet and noisy moments. But nothing about the river had ever felt like this. The sun was going down behind the hills. The sky was orange and purple, like a big, colorful painting. Oba's net was heavy with the day's catch, and the mud crushed under his bare feet as he prepared to return home. He was about to lift his bundle of fish when he saw the water ripple in an odd way, sending small waves against the shore. At first, he thought it was a large fish, or maybe a crocodile. But then he saw her. Rising slowly from the water, her dark skin glistened in the dying sunlight. Her hair, long and thick, clung to her shoulders in damp curls, and her eyes were the deepest shade of brown he had ever seen. She was half submerged, the water lapping just below her shoulders, but Oba couldn't look away, because there, between her chest, was something glowing softly like a heartbeat made of light. He froze. The weight of his catch slipped from his shoulder, the fish flopping weakly in the dirt as he stared. The glow seemed alive, pulsing gently, and for a moment, Oba felt as though it was calling to him. The woman tilted her head, her lips curving into a small, knowing smile. "Fisherman," she said, her voice as soft as the river's current, "you shouldn't be here." Oba's legs felt rooted to the ground, but his heart was racing. The woman's presence was both terrifying and mesmerizing, and he couldn't bring himself to move. He had heard the stories of river spirits, Mamiwata, the elders called them. They were dangerous, seductive, and vengeful. Yet this woman didn't look vengeful. She looked sad. "What are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She laughed softly, the sound like water rushing over smooth stones. "I am part of this river," she said, "and you, fisherman, have stumbled into a place you do not understand." Oba's eyes flickered back to the glow. "What is that?" he asked, gesturing hesitantly. The woman's gaze followed his, and her smile faded. "It is my heart," she said simply. "The elders of your village would call it a curse, but it is only life." Oba didn't know what to say. His hands were trembling, not with fear, but with something else he couldn't name. He felt as though he had seen something forbidden, something too sacred for a man like him to witness. Oba didn't tell anyone about the encounter when he returned to the village that night. He couldn't. The elders would call him foolish, or worse, cursed. But the vision of the woman and her glowing heart stayed with him, haunting his dreams and his waking thoughts. He remembered the stories his grandmother used to tell by the fire when he was a boy. "The river spirits are not to be trusted," she would say, her voice low and ominous. "They will lure you in with their beauty and their promises, but they will destroy you in the end." Yet, the woman by the river hadn't seemed dangerous. Her eyes had been filled with something else, something that felt more human than the cold, vengeful spirits his grandmother had warned him about. The next evening, Oba found himself drawn back to the river. He told himself it was to fish, but his net stayed dry as he sat on the bank, staring at the water. He was about to leave when he saw her again. "You came back," she said, her voice tinged with surprise. "I don't know why," Oba admitted. The woman stepped closer, the glow from her heart casting faint ripples of light across the water. "Perhaps," she said, "you are not like the others." Oba and the woman, whose name was Adaora, began meeting by the river every evening. She told him stories of the river's life, of its creatures and currents, of its strength and fragility. Oba listened, captivated not just by her words, but by the way she spoke, softly, with a kind of sadness that made his chest ache. "What is the glow?" he asked one night, his voice tentative. Adaora looked down at her chest, where the light pulsed faintly. "It is my heart," she said. "It is what connects me to this river, to this life. Without it, I would be nothing." Oba frowned. "Why does it glow like that?" Adaora hesitated, her gaze drifting to the water. "Because it is pure," she said finally. "It is what I am. But to those who do not understand, it is a temptation. Men have tried to take it before." Oba felt a chill run down his spine. "What happens if they take it?" "The river dies," Adaora said simply, "and so do I." The nights at the river became Oba's sanctuary. Adaora's presence was unlike anything he had ever known, and though her beauty drew him in, it was the glow of her heart that captivated him most. It pulsed softly, casting a light that seemed to echo in his chest. He didn't know why, but when he looked at it, he felt exposed, like it was reflecting his own hidden desires and fears. One evening, as they sat by the water, Adaora looked at him with a question in her eyes. "Why do you keep coming back?" Oba hesitated. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just feel like I have to." Adaora's lips curved into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Do you think I am like the stories your elders tell?" she asked. "Do you think I am a temptation meant to destroy you?" Oba shook his head quickly. "No," he said, "you're not like that. But I don't understand why you're showing yourself to me. Because you see," she said softly, "you don't just take. You look and you feel. That is rare." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Oba felt his chest tighten, and he realized he was holding his breath. He looked at her heart again, its glow steady and pure, and felt a surge of emotion he couldn't name. It wasn't lust, not exactly, but it was close, and it made him feel like he had crossed a line he couldn't return from. Oba tried to stay away from the river, but it was impossible. The pull was too strong, like an invisible thread tying him to Adaora. But every time he saw her, the feelings grew stronger, and he began to question himself. Was this love? Or was it something darker, something selfish? One night, as they sat close enough for him to see the faint shimmer of her scales beneath the water, Adaora asked, "What do you feel when you look at me?" Oba's heart pounded. I don't know," he said truthfully. "It's like you're not real. But at the same time, you feel more real than anything I've ever known." Adaora studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "What you feel," she said finally, "is the truth of your own heart. The glow you see in me is not just mine, it is yours too." Oba frowned. "What do you mean?" "The heart reflects what it sees," Adaora said. "It shows you what you carry inside yourself. That is why some men try to take it. They see what they lack, and they think they can steal it." Oba felt a chill run down his spine. "And what do you see in me?" Adaora's gaze softened. "I see someone who is lost," she said, "but not beyond saving." Oba's frequent visits to the river didn't go unnoticed. The villagers began to whisper, their words tinged with suspicion and fear. "He's been spending too much time by the water," one woman said. "The spirits have gotten to him." Okonkwo, the village elder, was less forgiving. "He's playing with fire," he said. "If he keeps this up, he'll bring a curse upon us all. Oba tried to ignore the rumors, but they reached his family, and his mother confronted him one evening. "Oba," she said, her voice trembling, "what are you doing by the river? People are saying you've seen something unnatural." Oba avoided her gaze. "I'm just fishing," he said. "That's all." But his mother wasn't convinced. "You're lying," she said. "I can see it in your eyes. Whatever you've seen, leave it alone. The river spirits are dangerous." Oba wanted to tell her the truth, but he knew she wouldn't understand. No one would. One fateful night, Oba found himself closer to Adaora than ever before. The moon was high, and the glow of her heart seemed brighter than usual, casting soft ripples of light across the water. She was speaking, but Oba wasn't listening. He was staring at the light, feeling a pull he couldn't resist. Without thinking, he reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her chest. Adaora froze, her eyes wide, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Oba snapped his hand back, shame washing over him like a wave. I don't know," he stammered. "I'm sorry." Adaora's gaze softened, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "Do you see now?" she asked. "This is what happens. The heart reveals, and men cannot resist what they see. But it is not yours to take." "I wasn't trying to," Oba began, but she shook her head. "I know," she said, "but the line has already been crossed." The next morning, Oba returned to the river, determined to make things right. Adaora was waiting for him, her expression calm but distant. "I need to understand," he said. "Why did you let me see your heart? If it's so dangerous, why show it to me?" Adaora looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "Because you are different," she said. "Most men see only what they lack, and they try to take it. But you see more than that. You see the truth." "What truth?" "That the heart is not about power or possession," she said. "It is about connection. It shows you the parts of yourself you are too afraid to face. That is why it draws you in, not because you want it, but because you want what it shows you about yourself." Oba felt tears prick his eyes as her words sank in. He realized that the feelings he had weren't about Adaora at all. They were about himself, about the emptiness he had carried for so long without even knowing it. Oba began to change after that moment by the river. The shame of his near mistake lingered, but it also gave him clarity. He realized that his feelings for Adaora weren't lust, they were awe. She was a mirror reflecting his own fears, desires, and brokenness. He decided he would honor her trust and protect the secret of her heart. But not everyone shared his newfound respect. One evening, as Oba sat on the riverbank, Adaora emerged from the water, her glow dimmer than usual. "Something is wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "The river feels heavy." "What do you mean?" Oba asked, his concern mounting. "Someone has poisoned it," Adaora said. "I can feel it. The balance is shifting." Oba's heart sank. He knew immediately what had happened. The villagers, fueled by fear and superstition, had begun pouring their waste into the river, hoping to drive away the spirit they believed was haunting Oba. "I'll stop them," Oba said, rising to his feet. "I promise." But Adaora's gaze was distant. "It's not just them," she said softly. "Someone close to you has betrayed me." Oba froze. "What are you talking about?" "Your elder," Adaora said. "Okonkwo. He has called for help from the outsiders." The next day, strangers arrived in the village. They came with promises of wealth and prosperity, offering to cleanse the river and make it a resource the village could profit from. Okonkwo welcomed them with open arms, ignoring Oba's protests. "They will destroy the river," Oba shouted during a meeting. "They don't care about us. They care about what they can take." But Okonkwo dismissed him. "You've been bewitched by the spirit," he said. "These men are here to save us." The villagers, torn between Oba's warnings and Okonkwo's promises, stood in uneasy silence. Oba felt helpless. He had seen the truth of the river, but no one would listen. That night, he went to Adaora, his heart heavy with guilt. "I failed you," he said. "I couldn't stop them." Adaora placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm despite the cold water. "You haven't failed yet," she said, "but you must act quickly. If they take what they seek, it will destroy everything." The outsiders began setting up machinery along the riverbank, their noisy tools disrupting the quiet rhythm of the village. Oba watched in horror as they poured chemicals into the water, claiming it would purify it. Desperate, he confronted Okonkwo. "You don't understand what you've done," he shouted. "The river isn't just water, it's alive. If you kill it, you'll kill us all." But Okonkwo was unmoved. "The river has been here for centuries," he said. "It will survive. We need this progress." Frustrated and outnumbered, Oba turned to Adaora for guidance. "What can I do?" he asked. "They won't listen to me." Adaora's glow was faint, her strength fading with each passing day. "The river has a voice," she said, "but it needs someone to speak for it. Will you?" Oba nodded, determination hardening his resolve. "I will." On the day the outsiders planned to begin their full-scale operation, Oba stood before the gathered villagers, his voice trembling but strong. "You've seen the fish disappear," he said. "You've seen the water darken. Do you really think this is the future we want?" Some villagers hesitated, their faces filled with doubt. But others, including Okonkwo, scoffed. "Enough of this nonsense," the elder said. "We've made our decision." Before Oba could respond, Adaora emerged from the water. Gasps rippled through the crowd as her glowing heart became visible to all. Her presence was both mesmerizing and terrifying, and for a moment the villagers were too stunned to speak. "This is the river you are killing," she said, her voice resonating with a power that seemed to echo through the hills. "It is not just water. It is life." The villagers stared, their fear giving way to awe. Even Okonkwo seemed shaken. But the outsiders weren't deterred. One of them, a man with cold eyes, stepped forward. "That glow," he said, pointing at Adaora's chest. "It's power. We need it." Oba stepped in front of Adaora, his arms outstretched. "You'll have to go through me." The man smirked. "That can be arranged." The confrontation turned violent. The outsiders advanced, their tools and weapons gleaming in the sunlight. The villagers, emboldened by Adaora's presence, rallied behind Oba, forming a barrier between the outsiders and the river. In the chaos, one of the outsiders lunged at Adaora, his hands reaching for her glowing heart. Oba moved without thinking, throwing himself in front of her. The man's weapon struck him, and Oba fell to the ground, blood staining the dirt. "No!" Adaora cried, her glow intensifying. The light from her heart erupted, blinding everyone around her. The outsiders screamed, their shadows twisting as they fled into the forest, leaving their machines behind. The light faded, and Adaora knelt beside Oba, her tears mixing with the river's water. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "Because you showed me what it means to love," Oba said, his voice weak but steady. "Not just you, but the river, the life it gives. I couldn't let them take it." Adaora placed her glowing hand over his wound, and warmth spread through him. The bleeding stopped, and Oba felt his strength return. The outsiders never returned, and the village began to heal. The river's glow returned brighter than ever, and the fish came back in abundance. The villagers, humbled by what they had witnessed, vowed to protect the river and honor its spirit. Oba became the village's guardian, his bond with Adaora stronger than ever. Though she couldn't leave the water, their connection transcended boundaries, rooted in trust and love. As the years passed, the story of Oba and the river spread far beyond the village, becoming a tale of redemption, unity, and the power of a pure heart. And though Oba grew old, he never stopped visiting the river, where Adaora waited, her glow a constant reminder of the life they had saved, and the love that had saved them all. Years after the events that united the village and saved the river, Oba's story had become a legend. Children gathered by the riverbank to hear their elders recount the tale of the fisherman who stood against greed and chose love, sacrifice, and the purity of the heart over all else. The river thrived under the care of the villagers, its waters clear and its banks lush with greenery. Oba, now an old man, often sat by the river, his cane resting against his leg. Though his steps were slower and his hands bore the marks of age, his spirit was as vibrant as the flowing waters. He still spoke to Adaora, though fewer could see her now. She would emerge when the moon was full, her glow as soft and welcoming as ever, her heart still pulsing with the rhythm of life. "You've done well," she said one quiet evening, her voice warm. "The river is safe because of you." Oba smiled, his eyes glistening. "No, Adaora, it's safe because of us." Oba's legacy lived on long after he was gone. The villagers passed down his teachings, ensuring that the river remained a source of life, unity, and love. Adaora's presence became a symbol of the river's sacredness, and her glowing heart a reminder of the purity and strength that comes from protecting what matters most. The once divided community now stood together, bound by the understanding that the river was not just water. It was life, love, and a reflection of their own hearts. The story of Oba and Adaora teaches us that the choices we make today shape the future for generations to come. Just as Oba learned to protect the river, we must learn to respect and nurture the world around us. Nature, like the river, gives us life, but it also depends on us for its survival. Let this tale inspire you to protect the environment and honor its gifts. Stand against greed and exploitation even when it's difficult. Recognize the beauty and purity in the world and in yourself. Oba's story reminds us that the heart reflects what we carry within us. May we all strive to carry love, compassion, and the courage to do what is right. The river flows, and its story lives on. What legacy will you leave behind?